Coming into the new year, I think it's probably a good time to discuss the year that was 2024 for Pokemon Unite. A year that had some wild highs and also some crazy lows, and a year that really left me scratching my head as to what was going on with this game until we came towards the end and everything became very clear. I hope this video finds you well, and I hope it leaves you with a sense of, well, at least a recap as to whatever this was, and hopefully with a glimmer of hope. I think I said hope there a few times, but you get what I'm saying. Here we go, 2024 for Pokemon Unite. It was a lot, and not enough. To understand where we went with 2024, we do need to take a look at what happened really quickly with 2023. 2023 was an amazing year for Unite. The popularity of the Unite Championship Series was at its highest level ever, with the World Championships in Yokohama, Japan, reaching record viewership numbers.
Here we are, the grand finals of the Pokemon Unite World Championships live in Yokohama, Japan. Luminosity, Omo, Abyssinian, and one of them will be crowned our champion. That was a period. The best team in the world 2 years in a row. Luminosity from North America, let's go!
North America had won its second back-to-back title. Every region looked insanely competitive, and Mewtwo was on the horizon. The huge anniversary release of these legendary Pokemon was going to be massive for the game, and it was. These Pokemon were massive. They drew huge numbers of people to Pokemon Unite, specifically I think because of their design philosophy. You see, Mewtwo Y and Mewtwo X were designed for novice players. They really were designed for people who had never picked up Pokemon Unite before, and they would give them a decent chance inside of a match to compete with some players who have been playing for a long time. I actually think it was pretty smart what they did with these Pokemon. However, they were insanely overpowered. Mewtwo Y being one of the most overpowered things in a MOBA, I believe, of all time. Mewtwo was a massive success for Pokemon Unite. Now, please delete it. Ding. After a start of the year that already had to deal with Zacian, we then had to deal with Mewtwo X and Mewtwo Y being so broken for so long. And I think at first, this really helped the game. There were tons of players that were excited to check it out. But once these Pokemon later in the year actually got nerfed and started to become more in line with the rest of the roster, all of the players who were here to basically play an action RPG Diablo style game with Mewtwo fell off. And all of the players that they upset because of what they did with Mewtwo also started to fall away. You definitely saw a drop in the player base around the end of the year 2023, beginning of the year 2024. And another change that comes very soon really cements the decline of Unite's player base. First, let's talk about Gyarados. In January, our first release of the year happens, and that is Gary. A pretty decent release, even though it's a little underpowered with one moveset. That hasn't fully changed. A very cool idea, and I'm very glad that it made its way to the game. Gary was a very fun Pokemon, and I do think it started the year off in an exciting way. Very quickly after that, we found out the next couple Pokemon coming to the game, and there was a lot of excitement around it. Early in the year, leaks started coming out about what would be our Pokemon Day Pokemon, and that would be Miraidon, followed by Phalanx. Both of these Pokemon are really cool. Their kits are very exciting. Once we got to play them in the public test server, people were stoked. Also, inside the Miraidon and Phalanx leaks, we found some really interesting information, and this would be the first controversy of the year for Pokemon Unite, and that was Shiny Spray. Prolific leaker El Chico Eevee found in the files for Unite that the Shiny Spray was going to have some sort of stat attachment for their Pokemon. Basically, you would put Shiny Spray on a Pokemon and it would add a nominal amount of HP or attack or whatever to the Pokemon. This obviously upset the player base. This would create an item that was essentially pay to win. Now, of course, the nominal amount of HP or attack or whatever the change would be wouldn't actually give you the ability to win a match, but it would give you a statistical advantage inside of a match with something that you could pay gems for. Now, interestingly enough, we never got to see that version of Shiny Spray in the game because very quickly Pokemon came out. In fact, they came to me and let me know that Shiny Spray did not have a stat effect. They actually didn't only come to me with this information. They were letting everyone know inside their Pokemon Discord that this is something they were seeing being talked about in the community and that the Shiny Spray had no stats attached to it. I actually made a video while I was live streaming because I was messaging with one of the Pokemon reps about this item. It was a hot button issue, and I thought it was very good for people to know that it did not have stats attached to it. I thought this was a great move by Pokemon. First off, to address it, which is something they don't often do in Unite. And also, if it didn't have stats attached to it before, great, they got out in front of this issue. And if it did have stats attached to it, and they reversed course on this decision, I also think that was really, really nice. It's the start of a weird pattern for Pokemon Unite throughout the year. Bad news, good news, bad news, good news, and this is going to continue throughout 2024. Before Miraidon is released, we have the UCS season start up once again. The Pokemon Unite Championship season is back with exciting matches from all around the world, with a ton of amazing teams getting to showcase their skills for everyone. During one of our broadcasts, we had a very weird situation present itself where Logan Paul somehow talked about wanting to become a Pokemon Unite champion. This was a very weird moment for Unite, and it's funny because it actually had nothing to do with anyone at Pokemon, anyone at Unite. Nobody knew exactly where this came from, but Logan Paul genuinely tweeted out that he was going to become a Pokemon Unite champion. There were a lot of theories as to exactly how Logan was going to do this, possibly take up partial residence in OC so he would compete in that region with other players that he had been talking to. It was a very weird, funny moment for the Unite community, and I just feel like it has to be in this video because as I was scrolling back through the year, I remembered being at that studio in Burbank while Logan was tweeting about this, going to everyone saying, is there any way Pokemon had something to do with this? Is this some sort of like hidden ad? Because people were acting like, of course, this must be some weird hidden sponsored ad. No, Pokemon Unite did not pay Logan Paul to talk about it. First off, it's illegal to have an ad like that, I guess. But in general, it was just full-on confusion from everyone at Pokemon, full-on confusion from the Pokemon Unite community, and Logan Paul so far has not become a world champion. But there's still next year. As the season raged on, Miraidon did release on Pokemon Day. Not only did Miraidon release on Pokemon Day, before Pokemon Day, we got a letter from the producers, and it was official. Draft was coming to Master Rank of Pokemon Unite. I have a lot of opinions on Draft inside Pokemon Unite. Hey, inside Pokemon Unite. Now, while some members of the community have thought we were possibly not ready for Draft in Pokemon Unite, are we ready for Draft? Because I don't know if we're ready for Draft. I, for one, did celebrate it coming to the game, and I was excited to see it. There are issues with Unite that are bigger than Draft Mode, and I hope that they address those so that Draft Mode can be even better. Also, they could fix some problems with Draft in general. Draft is interesting because it's great for the game, and also, it's not implemented that well. Pokemon Unite seems to do that sometimes, don't they? With Draft coming to the game, we also had our Pokemon Day Pokemon, and that was the legendary Miraidon. There was some question as to whether or not Koraidon would also come to the game, but Miraidon made its way to Pokemon Unite, and of course, it was broken. Of course it was. For some reason, all of these legendary EX Pokemon were designed to be too good, and it frustrated many in the community, myself included. Well, first off, happy Pokemon Day. I think we should start by saying happy Pokemon Day. You know, I'm thinking about this patch, and I have to say, this patch really sucks. This patch sucks, and this situation in ranked sucks, and Miraidon kind of sucks. I have to be honest, after another legendary release, I was pretty defeated. It felt so frustrating to run into the same situation that we had before with Mewtwo, and it just looked like a cycle that was never going to end. And I do think Miraidon, for a lot of players, was the final nail in the coffin, recognizing that the devs, just for whatever reason, would not balance the game properly, instead focusing on making certain Pokemon better because they were supposed to be in the lore of Pokemon, even though that doesn't work well in a MOBA at all. Later in the year, we do get some hope with this issue, and since then it's actually been insanely better. In fact, we have had better balance this year than we've ever had inside Pokemon Unite. Hey, it's there again. But at the same time, I think the damage was already done for so many players, and you saw that with not only Zacian, Mewtwo X, Mewtwo Y, and now Miraidon. After Pokemon Day on February 27th, we had a pretty big drought in Pokemon Unite releases. Not only a drought in releases, but a drought in patches. In fact, we didn't have our next Pokemon until late April. This was a huge change from previous years, where we had about a Pokemon a month. Now we weren't getting one for 2 straight months. And the next release, Ceruledge, didn't come until mid-June. The release schedule for Pokemon was slowing down to a snail's pace, and I think the community could feel it. It was not at all what we had become accustomed to for this game, and it clearly looked like the devs were working on something else, and they were, a few other things. One of those things was Honor of Kings. Honor of Kings, the biggest MOBA in China, was making their way for a global release, releasing in tons of other markets, and Timmy was clearly focusing on this, but that's not all they were working on. Around this time, we also saw lots of footage from the Pokemon Unite Chinese beta, and the game looked quite different. Before we get into the Chinese release of this game and the Chinese beta, let's go back to talking a little bit about this year. After Pokemon Day, as we were getting ready for Phalanx to come to the game, we had a massive leak that Ho-Oh would be our legendary anniversary Pokemon. This was leaked by Phil Yumas, and eventually it turned out that this was 100% true. Ho-Oh was going to be our anniversary Pokemon. Phalanx was released into the game, and honestly, it was a breath of fresh air. One of the best designs I think they've had on a Pokemon in a while. I think it got people excited again, and it was a fun Pokemon to draft around. Now that draft was really in the ranked mode of this game, with this season, you could actually play around Phalanx in some super exciting ways, drafting things like Venusaur or Extreme Speed Lucario against it. It really made a Pokemon that was clearly very, very powerful feel not so crazy. Before we had Ceruledge release, we had the Dragon Carnival that came to the game, which was a pretty basic game mode, but I think it gave people at least something to be excited for. And then we had the release of Ceruledge, which is a fantastic release. I think it's an amazing Pokemon. It's really exciting. It's been good since release, while at times feeling pretty dang powerful. It never reached the heights of some of the more broken things that the game has released. Then this is around the time that Honor of Kings came out and the Chinese beta started rearing its, well, beautiful head. Let's face it, the game looks pretty interesting and pretty amazing. A little different from what we've had, and clearly it should. It's been in development for essentially 3 years longer than the version of Pokemon Unite that we have played. We saw lots of different mini games and different abilities for Pokemon. More and more would begin to be revealed about this, especially with its impending release. We didn't know exactly when at that point, but Pokemon Unite's version in China would be released on November 7th. As we jump back to our global version at this point, we're around mid-July, where a producer letter comes talking about the anniversary for Unite, the fact that the game has been downloaded 150 million times worldwide, and with some interesting information. This was going to be this weird cycle of good news, bad news for the game. EX Pokemon were going to be removed from Pokemon Unite. The design philosophy around EX Pokemon has long been criticized because it's, well, frankly bad for a MOBA and bad for the game, and I really would have loved to have seen a world where Mewtwo was extremely good but not crazy broken. However, here we are, Pokemon Unite with an amazing announcement. They were going to balance these EX legendary Pokemon with the rest of the roster and remove their EX tag completely. You see, with multiple points in the year, we had EX Pokemon banned from Ranked. They were banned in the Unite Championship Series. They were basically banned everywhere. So you had these amazingly cool releases that people were excited for, that it was either cringe to play or something that they wouldn't even be allowed to play at all. Pokemon came out and said they're going to balance them with the rest of the roster. EX was a bad idea, and somehow the community was healing. Right around this time, we also got our first named balance patch, which is a trend that I've really enjoyed and I think is really cool. It was called Scorching Waves. Inside this letter, they also talked about essentially a refocus on what Unite needs. More frequent balance patches that are going to address more of the issues in the game, which they have delivered on, as well as Pokemon releasing every single month, which, since they have begun implementing this, they have also delivered on. These are extremely important things for a live service game, and it really did feel like the devs were listening to the player base and they were making great changes. And then just like every moment this year, somehow good news can't stay good for too long. Very soon after all of this really exciting news, we had the bizarre news that the Unite Club membership was going to change. The Unite Club membership would now no longer give you a monthly skin, and it would give you less Eos gems on a monthly basis. I'm not even really sure where they were coming from with this change, but I think a lot of this pricing has to do with pricing models that align with their Chinese version, which gives me a little hope, but also can have some pretty grim outcomes. Right around this time, we had the next 3 Pokemon coming to the game leak, and they were all very exciting. Armarouge was okay, Darkrai was a fan favorite, and Psyduck was just, I mean, unbelievably exciting. I remember Psyduck being announced at Worlds, and the place went nuts for it. A group of people who may or may not be that interested in Unite, seeing them come to the game, you could tell that they were making a great decision with some of these releases. We also had a massive announcement at Worlds. Worlds this year was held in Honolulu, Hawaii. It was an amazing time. Japan, a region that had always performed well at the Pokemon Unite World Championships, finally cemented their place as the top team, winning the World Championships. Fennel looked unbeatable. They were clearly the kings of the game. During the World Championships, I had the pleasure alongside my co-caster Doobsnacks to actually show off the 500 point mode coming to the game. This was something that I was so excited to bring everyone, not only because the mode is exciting, but because of what it could mean for the game. And this mode, along with a few other things, are some of the most exciting things I think about Pokemon Unite right now, and truly they are the things that could save the game. They flew in players from mainland China, as well as had influencers from all over play this show match in front of everyone, letting them know about a new mode that would be coming to the game. It will start out as a casual mode, but possibly make its way to become Pokemon Unite's ranked mode in the future. There are a lot of things to say about this, which I think I have a ton of opinions on, but without question, this is one of the things that could turn this game around. And with such a rough release year for the game, we absolutely need new life in this game. Pokemon Unite has clearly lost a ton of players and a ton of interest compared to where it was in 2023. And this mode, along with some other things, I think could be the thing that actually saves Pokemon Unite. Let's get into it. Before Worlds, we did have Ho-Oh come to the game as our last EX Pokemon. This was actually a really exciting release, and it was nowhere near as broken as any of the former EX Pokemon. And very soon after, the EX tag dropped off all of these Pokemon, and they were all just able to be played in every mode, and they weren't as broken as they should have never been. Right around this time, we also have an increase in the cost of the Battle Pass inside Pokemon Unite. So while the membership is giving you less gems, the Battle Pass is costing more. You used to be able to use your Unite Club membership to get a decent amount of gems. You'd buy the Battle Pass and then maybe save up for a few other things you were interested in, and now that was becoming harder and harder. Clearly, Eos gems were suffering from a crazy amount of inflation, and that has not stopped. After this Battle Pass, we also had the Sylveon Pokemon Orange Tag Holoware come to the game. And this came to the game in the form of a bizarre loot box system where you have to upgrade chests to a certain tier, and then those chests have the opportunity to have a certain amount of tickets inside them where you could get the skin with like a 0.02% chance with every chest. You also could spend an insane amount of money on this skin. For me personally, going through and seeing what these skins have cost me, we had Sylveon, then Gengar, now more recently Pika, which I'll talk about momentarily. All of these skins have cost a lot. I think Sylveon was somewhere around 70 bucks. Gengar was actually a cheap one. I ended up getting lucky with that. I think I got it around 20 bucks. And then the Pikachu is, well, we'll talk about Pikachu. But with this change, we also got the extremely unfortunate news that Pokemon Unite was going to be taken out of Belgium and the Netherlands. The reason for this being is they were going to adopt a lot of the pricing and monetization models that you would find in the Chinese version of this game, and that is not compatible with the laws in Belgium and the Netherlands. So in this coming year, I believe it's late November of the year, they will no longer be able to play the game from their regions. The reason for this being they have more strict laws in those regions around loot boxes and things like that. And because of that, the game will no longer operate there. Many other high-profile games will also be leaving there very soon. A huge game for Pokemon, Pokemon Pocket, never even released there. While I think it's amazing that they have these laws, the unfortunate thing is if you are the first few countries implementing great laws for consumers, some businesses are just simply going to stay out of there, especially if your business model doesn't align with what works in a massive market like China. A lot of the community was very upset by this. Of course, I made a video called "Should I Delete This Video?" in which I just basically complained about it for a while because I think it's really unfortunate that we are losing players in this game because of this game's monetization. A few months ago now, Tinkaton and Galarian Rapidash were leaked for the game. People were understandably excited because these are some very cool releases. Right around this time, Darkrai came out and it was kind of bad-ish, and then they buffed it into a crazy place, and then it was turbo broken-ish. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, even with all of the balance changes in the game, Pokemon Unite has never been able to accurately figure out where their Pokemon are going to land once they make it to the game. They seem to buff things and nerf things way too much at different times. Other times, they seem to have patches where they barely touch anything. For instance, earlier in the year, we had a patch where they buffed some of Machamp's defenses a little bit, and then also buffed submission a little. That was the patch for Machamp. That's what they did. They buffed submission a little bit. Moving on. We had more named patches throughout the year: Hyper Voltage, Freezing Rush, The Next Step. We also had Goal Hacker released as an item and then immediately forgotten about. This year, we also had the Pokemon Unite Championship Series start back up earlier this year with a live tournament at LAIC. And then just 3 weeks ago, as I record this video, we had a massive announcement from Pokemon. They were going to fix matchmaking. The announcement was obviously very well received, and I still would like them to attempt to fix matchmaking. I've talked about this a lot, and I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but let's face it, they didn't do what they said they were going to do. The point allocation doesn't work, and because of the point allocation not working, players are not paired into better games. If anything, matchmaking is essentially the same, and it's possibly slightly worse. I don't know what else to say about it except please just actually do the thing you said you were going to do. It's such a frustrating situation, again with Unite, to constantly have this amazing thing put in front of you and then at the same time a huge pile of bad news right alongside it. They're fixing matchmaking. They did it wrong. Then just a couple weeks ago, we had the Crystal Tier Pikachu skin come to the game, which I still don't know exactly what it would cost, but I could imagine that someone could spend maybe $150 or $200 on this in-game cosmetic item. And I think my biggest issue with this is, while we're getting some of the monetization from the Chinese version of the game, we are not getting all of the amazing bells and whistles that come along with the Chinese version. And now that we've talked around it for a while, well, let's talk about it. Again, in November, this game released in China, and the version was a stark contrast to the game we're playing. This version of the game had an open hub world where you would be able to interact with your Pokemon, play mini games, show off your trainer fashion, dance around with Mr. Mime, like all this stuff that I think Pokemon fans just outside of Pokemon Unite have been wanting for a very long time. Not only that, this version was clearly cleaner and clearly more developed. No surprise, again, it took 3 more years of development time to release this version in China, and I think this is obviously what the devs were doing throughout this year. The reason we had a slow release schedule, the reason patches weren't coming very fast, is because they were working on this version of the game and it was nowhere near ready. They had to put an insane amount of effort into this as well as Honor of Kings. Unfortunately, for the global version of Unite, that kind of left us out in the cold. As we looked at the Chinese version, we saw little glimpses of what our game could be and may be one day. But right now, definitely is not. It's hard not to look at the Chinese version of this game and feel like we are clearly playing the inferior beta version of this game in the global release. Now, there are a lot of things about our game that I think I'm going to like more than the possible China version, but regardless, they are clearly taking a very specific direction for this game. They are trying to make a different game for the Chinese market, and possibly for the global market, but that's still to be seen. I don't want to leave this video on a down note, and not just because I don't want to, but also because I do think with all of this, there is some hope on the horizon. What Pokemon has said they were going to do for our game, they have been doing. We've been getting consistent Pokemon releases, and actually extremely frequent and consistent balance patches. Patching a lot of different Pokemon and then having multiple parts within that patch over the course of maybe a month where you see lots of different changes for the game. I think they could be way more aggressive with some of these changes. Some of them are just not enough. You want a reason for players to decide to download this game again or load it up on their Switch because they just need to see what they have changed with some of their favorite Pokemon. However, it's great to see so much of an emphasis on the game's balance. The hope I want to leave you with is the hope of the merge of these two games. Look, I truly do not know if this will happen. One thing I can say for sure is the fact that Pokemon Unite is shutting down service in Belgium and the Netherlands is an indication that we will get a lot of what we see in the Chinese version of this game. I don't know how it would happen. I don't know if they're going to release Pokemon Unite 2.0 EX Masters plus Alpha. I don't know if our game's just going to get updated. I don't know if the Switch version is going to no longer be supported and it's just going to become a mobile game, very similar to what they have in China. I don't know if the 500 point mode is going to be received well by players, if that's going to bring a lot of excitement to the game, or if people are just kind of over it at this point. One thing is for sure in my mind. If we do head the direction of the China release, this could keep the game alive and thriving for years to come. Clearly, there are a lot of resources being put forward towards developing that game. All of your favorite Pokemon that have Holoware are getting animations for their intro screen and different trainer outfits that look amazing, and you have different ways to show it off, and there are tons of different unique game modes. So if you're not a hardcore, I just want to play ranked and I want to rank up kind of player, there's so much in this game for you to do. But we don't have that version yet. The version is out there. Hopefully we get to be a part of it soon. I'm not sure what 2025 is going to look like for Pokemon Unite. I honestly think it's going to be better than 2024, because I do think 2024 was our roughest year for the game. Here's to 2025, and hoping we see some pretty amazing stuff. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for listening. I love you guys. I appreciate you. And I'll see you all next time. We did it. We did it, everybody.